Bengals Chargers, Sunday Night Football. Bengals, man, desperation mode, as if they weren't in desperation mode before Thursday night, losing by 1 to the Baltimore Ravens. They're sort of in desperation mode, and it's a bad time to be in desperation mode. It's a bad time to travel all the way out to that stadium where they lost the Super Bowl. Sorry, Bengals fans that are listening to this. And going up against a team that is one of the best defenses in the NFL. And I think you see one of the best offenses, certainly one of the best quarterback wide receiver duos in Ja'Marr Chase and Joe Burrow. Perhaps T. Higgins, they're getting him back for this game as well. A lot of things to talk about. What's the matchup that matters here for Sunday Night Football, Carmen?
Yeah, it's got to be something on the Chargers defense, and I'm going with their defensive line against the Bengals offensive line, because you're right. The Chargers have one of the best defenses in the league, the best defense in the league statistically when you're talking about scoring defense in particular. 0 games allowing 20 or more points this season. That's the only NFL team that can say that. Second in EPA per play against. You've got 12.1% touchdown drives allowed. That's first in the league. 23.2 scoring drive rate, that's first in the league. 12 offensive touchdowns allowed, that is the fewest in the league. That is insane to say when we are in double-digit weeks that you have only allowed 12 offensive touchdowns as a defense. It's kind of incredible that then you look at their pressure rate in particular, and they have 144 pressures on the season, which only ranks 23rd. Their leaders in pressures, it's Khalil Mack with 28, and that's something that, again, is I guess a little bit of, if you could say that there's anything lacking in this Chargers defense, it doesn't seem to matter, again, because you're not scoring points against them. And that's ultimately what matters when we're talking about all of this. But the Bengals offensive line should be able to protect Joe Burrow against this defensive line for LA. I don't know, or in LA for that matter. We're going to have to, that's going to have to be part of it if you're going to allow Joe Burrow to be explosive on offense, to be able to hold the ball a little bit longer, to get it down the field to guys like Ja'Marr Chase, T. Higgins, hopefully coming back as well. And we're going to see. They are in desperation mode, the Cincinnati Bengals. I want to hold out hope. I've been talking about it all week about how I just refuse to believe that they're really out of the playoff picture, and technically they're not, and they're in the hunt and all of those things. But this has to get going. That game against the Ravens, again, just another heartbreaker where they were so close and it made no sense. The Bengals should have won that game and it didn't happen. So this is one that they have to get against an AFC opponent.
For my matchup that matters, I'm going to the Chargers coverage versus Ja'Marr Chase. And obviously you could throw T. Higgins in there, but specifically against Ja'Marr Chase because, we were told like, Joe Burrow, he needs both of these guys. It's so different when both these guys aren't out there. Well, look what happened last week. He was right there. I mean, they were carving him up. It was just an unbelievable performance by these two. It's basically a true manifestation of the we all we got, we all we need chant with Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase out there. So obviously anybody else that's out there, T. Higgins, I'm not just saying this is a cherry on top. He's a lot better than that. But that's sort of how we have to look at this. And when I look at Ja'Marr Chase, there's just not anybody or any defense that could really play a lot of single coverage against him. So the teams that have tried to play single coverage against Ja'Marr Chase, they have been burned for it. It's an interesting week this week in particular. It looks like the Chargers defense could be getting Christian Fulton back, which is a good sign. But this is not really a team that operates in single coverage anyways. You look at you can't play zone all the time. You can't play man all the time. You have to have a little bit of a mix of both. That's true. And so the Bengals sort of pick their spots of when they know that Ja'Marr Chase is going to be in single coverage situations and they can really attack it. Well, the Chargers are so good as a defense right now. And Lowman saying in the chat, it's like, if Jesse Minter, their defense coordinator, could hold the Bengals under 20 points, I mean, you got to think he's a top head coach candidate. I already think that. I already think the dude should be getting interviews this coming off season. Mm-hmm. But the Chargers in coverage this season, 72 snaps in single coverage this year. That's the second least in the NFL. They've played 206 coverage snaps in a too high shell, which, a lot of defenses, they have two deep safeties to make you throw underneath and not get beat deep. The third most in the NFL. So when you look at these big shots and these big major plays that we saw the Ravens give up against the Bengals, the Chargers don't really do that. 23 receptions of 15 or more yards. That's sixth best in the NFL for the Chargers defense. It's the sixth least of any team that has given up those passes. And they are sixth least in yards after the catch, which we know that Ja'Marr Chase is also a monster when it comes to yards after catch. So no matter how you slice it, This is going to be a game where if Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, and I'll throw T. Higgins in there as well, if they are going to play that top tier high scoring level, it will be their best performance yet, which is saying a lot with how well they have played so far this season. But this Chargers defense and their coverage plan specifically, what we have seen through 10 weeks of the year, is built to, I don't want to say silence, but slow down what the Bengals really want to do with their top two wide receivers. So I thought those statistics were very interesting, and that matchup of exactly what the Bengals want to do versus how well the Chargers have played it this year, I think is going to be a fascinating matchup. What about your plus factor? What do you got?
Yeah, my plus factor was very similar in that it was maybe not necessarily Jamar Chase, but just again, getting offensive production, getting those explosive plays. Also, Cincinnati is one of the best teams in the red zone. They have the second best red zone rate at 72.41% in the league, and they're averaging 27 points per game. They have 21 catches, gaining 15 or more yards, which ranks third. I mean, the offensive production, all of the stats lend themselves to just an incredible amount of production. The fact that they're scoring so much. They've scored 30 or more in 5 games, and yet they're sitting at the record they are. They have to finish. And that means getting into the end zone as much as they have been and then some, which it seems like a really tall task given how well they're already doing it. They're 9th in offensive EPA per play. But Jamar Chase, rather, the other LSU Tiger, I found a stat this was actually from Next Gen Stats, but he caught his game against the Ravens, 11 of 17 targets for 264 yards, 96 yards over expected. I think all of his fantasy managers were very, very happy about that. 3 touchdowns in week 10 against Ravens. It gives him the 2 highest single game receiving yardage outputs this season, and they both come against the Ravens. So that's another, again, a really, really good team in a really, really high pressure situation that needs to show up again. And now it's going to have to show up against, like we've been talking about, a defense that is just incredibly stingy when it comes to points on the board. I'm totally with you in everything that you said before, just about this is going to have to be the best game the Bengals have played, and they have to get over that hump. There is no almost. There is no try. There is only do for the Cincinnati Bengals right now.
Anybody else go up against Jamar Chase last week in fantasy? Just me?
Oh,
anybody
sorry,
else?
hon.
Anybody else? Yeah, that was not fun. It's not fun to look at your fantasy matchup on Friday morning and go, oh,
I'm not winning.
Oh, okay, we're not winning. All right, that's great. My plus factor in this one, since we've talked a lot about the Bengals offense, the true plus factor here, it's an obvious one, but I'm sorry I have to talk about it, guys. Justin Herbert's been unbelievable, and at the end of the day, for as much as I think the Titanic matchup that people are going to be talking about is the Chargers defense versus the Bengals offense, if the Bengals offense happens to have a little bit more success than maybe we thought that they were going to against Chargers, like let's say they score somewhere in the 20s, the fact of the matter is Justin Herbert's passing the football as good as any quarterback in the NFL right now. Since week 7, 94.4 passing grade. Stupid. 13 big-time throws, 0, count them all, 0 turnover-worthy plays. He is the way that Justin Herbert has been playing as he has gotten more healthy throughout this season has been worthy of a win against the Bengals and this titanic matchup of Justin Herbert versus Joe Burrow. And so to me, that has to be the plus factor here because he is playing in a way that just breaks the rules. It's not just, oh yeah, like he's playing well, he's a good quarterback out there. No. He's getting you out of all sorts of trouble. He is setting the tone in the passing game in ways that we did not think were going to be the case this year, right? We talked about, all right, well, they don't really have any weapons in the passing game. It's going to be a little bit of a work in progress. They're not going to score a lot. And sure, they're not lighting the scoreboard on fire, but what he is doing, he is playing that position, the most important position in the game, at such a high level that even if the Bengals score into the 20s, the Chargers can keep up with them. He can win the game. He can score into the 30s. Yeah. This is a really, really tough matchup on paper for the Bengals in a week where they would love to go and get themselves a win, certainly, because they're kind of running out of time and running out of games that they can get wins here to make sure they get in the playoffs. It's not even close to all but over, but this is a tough one, given how well Justin Herbert is playing and how well this defense is playing. Chargers just one of the best teams in the league right now when it comes to limiting what other people want to do and having a quarterback on their side They can do whatever he wants, it seems like. Thanks for watching, everybody. Make sure you like and subscribe the video. And if you don't have a PFF Plus subscription, you can get one to see all the premium stats that we talked about here on the show, plus the expert betting and fantasy advice over at subscribe.pff.com. The description is also right below, so if you are not a PFF Plus subscriber, you can become one today.